last weekend, it was homecoming at UGA. Y'all had a pretty good time about that, didn't you, huh? Well, a friend of mine was in a town where they were having homecoming in a college town, and Joe's Bar and Grill wanted to pull in some more business, so they had a sign out that said, "Students, bring your parents in for lunch and we'll act like we don't know you." Well, when the preacher at the First Baptist Church saw that, he said, "We can play off of this too." So they put up a sign that said, "Students, bring your parents to church this Sunday and we'll act like we know you." Does that sound familiar at all? Well, I'm from South Georgia. And they say in South Georgia, if you see a turtle sitting on a fence post, you can be assured of one thing. You know what it is? It didn't get there by itself. Well, the days that I feel like I'm sitting on a fence post, I look around and say, a lot of people lifted me. And one of the people that helped lift me was my dean here. And by the way, I'm one of 10 million that were in the last class of John E. Drury that he taught here. You'll hear a lot of people say he was in the last class. Actually, I was. But Dean Warren AG was the dean back in the late 60s. And he called me one day and said, "I want you to have lunch with a newspaper man from Statesboro, Leodale Coleman." I said, "Well, sure." Well, a free lunch for a college kid is a pretty good thing. So I met him at the Georgia Center, and Mr. Coleman said, "The dean has recommended you to come to Statesboro. You're exactly what we want." I said, "Me?" He said, "Yes. We keep hiring young people to come work at our newspaper, and then in a couple of years they leave. We're tired of running a training ground. My brother GC and I, we want to find someone like you to come to Statesboro. You stay with us a year. If we like you, you like us, we will give you 10% of our newspaper and with an option to buy the rest when we retire." I said, "Mr. Coleman, newspapers? I'm a public relations major at the Grady College. I'm planning to go to law school. I don't know anything about newspapers." "No, sir, I thank you. That's flattering, but no, I'm not interested." Well, I graduated. Uncle Sam needed me a little bit in the Army, and after 18 months of thinking about eating beanie weenies again and helping support my young bride, I thought, I really don't think I want to go back to law school. Besides, there were 22 lawyers already in my hometown. Well, in Jessup, there were 2 newspapers. And the publisher of the competing newspaper, the upstart paper, said, "We got 22 lawyers in Jessup. I don't even like those blankety blank folks anyway. There aren't but 2 newspapers in town. We about to buy the other newspaper. Can you raise $50,000? Now, we had maybe $500 in our account. I said, "Well, yeah, we can do that." Well, next thing is my wife gave up going to graduate school. I decided not to go to law school. We sold our townhouse and we loaded up my bachelor pad. It was a 12x40 New Moon mobile home, and we hitched it up and we took off to Jessup. Now that's me and my Dodge Coronet, and that is my wife and her Malibu, and we're following our future home in Jessup, Georgia. Well, got down there and the deal fell through. So I said to the fellows that owned the old newspaper, I said, "Hey, I didn't come down here for just a job." So they said that we'll sell you a 1/3 interest in this newspaper and we'll spread it out over time. But you're going to need to come up with $3,000 down payment. I didn't have $3,000. So I went to the first bank there in Jessup, First National. That was the bank that the newspapers were doing business in. And he said, "Yes, sir, I'll sell you money. I'll loan you money one of 2 ways." I said, "Well, I need to hear those. What ways would you loan me, Mr. Woodruff?" He said, "I'll loan you 10% of your net worth." I said, "Mr. Woodruff, we live in a 12x40 New Moon mobile home. We drive 2 used cars. My wife brings in $378 a month teaching. 10% of our net worth won't buy a new suit and a pair of shoes. What other way might you loan us the money?" He said, "I'll loan all the money your daddy will sign the back of the note for." I said, No, Mr. Woodruff. My dad's dad didn't put him in the funeral home business, and he's not putting me in the newspaper business. So I said, "Thank you very much." So I walked across the street and I was talking to Kerry Brannon, the banker there. I said, "Mr. Brannon, I need to borrow $3,000. "Well, why, son?" I said, "Well, I want to make a down payment on buying a 1/3 interest in the Wayne County Press." He said, "Son, that paper's never made any money." He said, "You need to come work at the bank." because one day you'll be the president, the chairman of this bank. I said, well, how does that work? He said, well, when I retire, Lonnie in this office here is going to move up. And when Lonnie retires, Linton's going to move up. And when Linton retires, Pat's going to move up, and he'll be president. And when Pat retires, I got you an office right down here by Pat. I said, well, how long will that take? He said, oh, about 25 years. I said, oh, my goodness, no, I don't. I was born in a hurry. I can't wait 25 years. Will you loan me that $3,000? He said, I'll loan it to you under one condition, that you promise to pay it back. He said, well, there's another condition. I don't ever want to come looking for you. Payments are sacred. Due dates are sacred. So he loaned me the $3,000. And there we went. Well, when he turned 90, I went in my Ford pickup truck. I fly in the F-150 around 3 or 4 states in the South. And I went by and picked up Kerry for his 90th birthday. And I thanked him for trusting a young UGA grad with a $3,000 loan. He eventually loaned me more. But I said, today there are almost 800 people on our payroll because you had faith in an untested journalism grad and loaned him $3,000. Well, things rocked on, and we did put the 2 newspapers together, and I'll tell you more about that. But one of the more interesting things that you have to learn is if hearing no as an entrepreneur hurts your feelings, think about another career, because I tell our people, unless you hear no 6 or 7 times, you're not selling, you're just taking orders. And this is one of my theme songs that I want to play for you.
Excuse me, yes sir, I understand, but do you actually have the word yes in your vocabulary? When I was a kid, if you said I couldn't do it, I did. Always had a stubborn streak, put a wall in front of me, and I'll find a way to get around it. There was a friend who said I'd never make the team. A lot of small town talk that said I'd never leave.
How many times have you had said no to you, huh? A bunch. Well, you have to get over that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to own your own business. When I'm going to, even today, I carry Buddy Jewell's CD to play in my truck, because if I'm going in to make a big presentation, I want to get pumped up and be ready, because I know I'm probably going to hear no, but I'm going to keep on keeping on, answering those objections, because a yes is out there somewhere. Well, in 1973, had only been there in business 2 years, it was time to buy some more newspapers, another newspaper. So a friend and I went down to Nassau County, Florida. Y'all know where Nassau County is? Some of you going to be at Amelia Island probably for the Georgia-Florida game. Not this weekend, but the next. But Callahan is a little cow town, a small town, rural town in West Nassau County. We went down there to purchase our second newspaper. And it was owned by the chairman of the bank and one of his lead directors. They had bought it for their wives to run. Imagine this now. It's because they wanted their wives to have something to do, and they didn't want the New York Times to own it. It was owned the Fernandina Beach News Leader, which was the oldest weekly in Florida. Robert and I didn't have any money, so we got them to finance the whole $35,000. And when they said they could, we could borrow that money. After they said yes, I said, by the way, there's one more matter. We're going to need $5,000 more to put in the cash register. So they loaned us, I can't do that math, Kent, but they loaned us more than 100% to buy that first newspaper outside of Jessup. So at that same year, well, it's sort of in a different line here. We'll get it worked out in a minute. Technology will raise up and bark at you sometimes. But in that same year, in 1973, and I guess I was 25 years old, I started trying to buy the New York Times newspaper in Fernandina, the oldest weekly in Georgia. New York Times, like your mama running you out of the kitchen. Get out of here, wouldn't talk. 27 years I heard no. In 2000, we purchased from the New York Times, the oldest weekly newspaper in Florida. So you can't get turned off by hearing no. Well, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to hear no a zillion times. When we were competing as a Wayne County Press against the Jessup Sentinel, I didn't know much about business, but I learned in a hurry. Advertising is what props up the newspaper. About 80% is advertising revenue, about 20% readership and circulation. Well, the Jessup Sentinel, our competitor, had 7 full pages of grocery advertising. 7 full pages. You know how many we had? 0. We didn't have 1 column inch of newspaper advertising. So I decided that if we were really going to bear down on the competition, we had to get us some grocery advertising, and if we were ever going to buy them, we'd have to put some pressure on them. So Jacksonville is where Winn-Dixie was founded, and it's 100 miles from Jessup, and the only day Mr. Hogue would see you would be on Tuesday, which is the worst day in the world for a weekly newspaper. So I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, leave at 6, be in Jacksonville at 8 o'clock in the morning, and make a presentation to win over that grocery advertising. Winn-Dixie was the biggest in town. I figured if we get the biggest, we'll get the others too. 1 year went by, 2 years went by, 3 years went by. The 4th year, I would go, 1 year we won best weekly newspaper in the state. I'd take my plaque down, I'd put it on, say, Mr. Hogue, look, we'd have been. 1 year we were the best weekly in our circulation class in the nation. I took a big old trophy and I pumped it down on his desk. I said, wouldn't you like to advertise in the best weekly newspaper in America? He said, yeah, but I'm pretty happy where I am. Rather than get frustrated, I kept thinking, there's a way to break this wall down. So I went to the bank, had a little better standing those days, and I borrowed $10,000, and I went down to Merrill Lynch in Jacksonville, the stock brokerage firm, and I bought $10,000 in Winn-Dixie stock. And so on my next trip, Dr. Middleton, I said, Mr. Hogue, how many years have I been coming to see you? He said, a long time, son, a long time. He liked to look at the flies on the ceiling. He said, a long time, a long time. I said, well, my wife teaches school. We live in a 12 by 40 New Moon mobile home. We drive 2 used cars. We've saved every dime we could to put in the newspaper business. And we have just invested every dime we could scratch up to put in the very best place, our financial broker says, on Wall Street, and that's Winn-Dixie stock. And I laid out my portfolio with Winn-Dixie stock. I said, now, do you think perhaps you could have just a little bit of confidence in us? Just see if we can give you the great returns I'm expecting from Winn-Dixie? He reached over and he picked up a computer printout, and I knew what he was doing. He was going down to store number 734 to see what percentage of sales did they spend on advertising, because that's really how they set their budget. He pushed a button. He said, Barbie, can you step in here? I said, in a minute, Barbie showed up. That was his assistant. He said, Mr. NeSmith. Now, I'm 20-something years old, and he's 70 years old. He said, Mr. NeSmith, can you handle a 2-page ad in your newspaper? I said, in fact, we can get it in tonight. We go to press about 5 o'clock. He said, Barbie, have Mr. NeSmith a 2-page slick here in just a moment. Well, I didn't drive back to Jessup that 100 miles. I floated all the way on a magic carpet. Well, we got that Winn-Dixie ad, and then the other grocery stores took note, and within 6 months, we had them all 7 pages had switched to our newspaper. And then in just a short time, we were able to purchase the other newspaper, the 112-year-old newspaper. And today, the Press Sentinel is my first newspaper, if you will, and then we've grown along the way. Well, if we'd kept all of the newspapers that we had purchased in the last 44 years, there would be 50 or 60, but we've sort of whittled down to about 25 that really make sense for us geographically. And I mentioned that turtle sitting up on the fence post. There are a lot of people that lifted me. And I am very guilty of borrowing a lot of other people's brains, OPB, other people's brains. I had to borrow a lot of them. And I had to borrow a lot of OPB, other people's money. And I've been very, very lucky that I've had people that would place confidence in me as an entrepreneur. And the co-owner of C&I is Tom Wood. I met him through the Georgia Press Association, and he was president of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And when I was chairman of this Grady board, he was on that board, and that's how we kind of got to know each other. And he walked away from Cox at 42, and we've been in business all these years. And he's a CPA by training. So if you invited us in, Keith, to remodel this, I'd get the sprayer and the rollers, and this is what I'd be painting, and then he'd be around the windows and the trim. Tom is a very good, detailed person. And I'll tell you, if you're planning a partnership with your entrepreneurial endeavor, get a good one, because the hardest ship to make float is a partnership. I've been in business with everybody but the King of England or the Queen of England and the devil. I've come close to the devil a time or two, but you need to really, really be careful. And we're so lucky in our company that a lot of people bring their energy and their brains. We hire a lot of Grady grads. We hire some Terry grads too, if any of you are from Terry. But we set our expectations high. Let's see if I can get back in gear here. Well, there's the Nassau County Record. That was purchased in '73, and then here's the News Leader, the oldest weekly in Florida, purchased from the New York Times. How many of you remember this guy? Neon Dion. You remember him? Played at FSU, back before y'all probably were born, but he was one of the first two sports athletes, played Major League Baseball and football. And he was playing for the Dallas Cowboys, and Jerry Jones was negotiating with Dion. He said, okay, Dion, what's it going to be? Is it going to be $7 million or is it going to be $8 million? He said, Mr. Jones, I'll take them both. And he paid him $15 million. Well, he knew how to negotiate. Well, in our newspapers, our mission statement says we want distinguished and we want profitable newspapers. We don't want to make just a bunch of money and put out some rags. We don't want to have just distinguished newspapers and border on bankruptcy. We like Dion. We want them both. We want distinguished and we want profitable. People will ask me, well, what is a good newspaper? Well, my answer is a good newspaper is a community talking to itself, and that conversation should have something for everyone. We want our newspapers to be an inseparable part of the community's soul. And if you were to separate our newspapers from the community, it'd sound much like this: a rip of a big strip of Velcro. We want to be embedded in the soul of our communities. And we believe that strong newspapers build strong communities. So we want to be strong enough financially that we can withstand recessions, downturns, and pressures that try to tell you what to put in your newspapers. There's our mission statement. But legal ads are big business in newspapers. These are foreclosures and other legal notices have to run. In one town, there were two newspapers where we own one, and the legals amounted to $100,000 a year, $125,000 a year. That's a lot of money when the newspaper only does $1 million worth of business. 10 or 15% is a lot. Well, one of the three officials that legally can make up the decision had a son who was a convicted drug dealer, and the sheriff, rather than send him off to prison, let this drug dealer stay in the local jail. And one day our reporter on a Sunday afternoon saw a picture of this convicted felon washing his girlfriend's car on Sunday afternoon when he's supposed to be in jail. We had the audacity to put that in the paper. Can you imagine? Well, those three officials conspired, and they held back $500,000 for over 5 years, $500,000 worth of legal ads from us, hoping to put us out of business. Well, you got to be strong enough to withstand that kind of economic pressure. Well, in about the 6th year, we bought the other paper, and they did some business with us anyway. But time marches on. When I was just competing in Jessup there, the three officials, I had known them all my lives that controlled that, they wouldn't put the legal ads in my newspaper. And I'd say, well, let's rotate it 1 year here, 1 year there, because it was significant. And one of them said, well, Sonny boy, if y'all would be a little nicer to the courthouse in your paper, we might consider doing that. I said, well, let's put it this way. If the Lord lets me live as long as the three of you have, time is on my side. one day we're going to be the legal organ of this county. Now you just can count on us coming back every year and talking about it. Well, they were natural deaths, I might point out, but 2 of the 3 died within the next 18 months. Well, we did get to be the legal organ. Well, newspapering in small towns, and that's basically where we are. We've got 2 dailies and some twice weeklies and weekly newspapers. It's not all refrigerator door journalism. Y'all familiar with that? Your mama clips it up and she puts it on the refrigerator. Well, it's not all about that. We get into some pretty tough stuff, and we make some people mad along the way too. In fact, Eric will probably remember this. He was just a tyke. But a disgruntled politician called me at home one night, and we insisted back in the day before cell phones came that all of our leadership would have their numbers listed. We want to be accessible to our people, to our readers. He called, we ran a story that was all truthful, but he didn't like it, and his tongue was kind of thick, and he was drunk, and he said, "I'm unhappy about what you put in the paper about me." I said, "Well, is any of it untrue?" "No, but you just shouldn't have done it. It's embarrassed me. I'm mad." And I said, "Well, I'm just sorry. That's part of being a public official, that like you are, we're going to keep doing it." He said, "I happen to know where you live." I said, "Yes, sir. We're at 256 South Brunswick Street. I think everybody knows that. And I know what your pretty wife looks like, too." I said, "Yes, sir. I was very lucky. I traded. I sure got a nice wife at the University of Georgia. And I know about your 3 children, too." He says, you just better tell them, watch out." I said, "Time out. You come to my office, we'll have a discussion. You come to my house, you put 1 foot on 1 step with ill intention, and I promise you, this is not a threat, it is a promise, I'll kill you graveyard dead. You will not harm my family. You understand?" And the next morning, I went down to the courthouse and got a pistol toter's permit and made some noise about it. Well, I ain't gonna want to hurt anybody, but till that guy died, when we'd go in McDonald's or Hardee's in Jessup, he'd see me, he'd go this way. Because you know what? He figured I might be as crazy as he is. Well, dang right, mess with my family, and you're in a heap of trouble. But I'm not gonna hurt anybody unless they mess with my family. Well, there's plenty of news in rural America, but what we also like to do is we like to find global, state, national, international news and bring it home. Find a way to bring the news home on a local way. This is 9/11. We all know, if we were alive, where we were when 9/11 happened. Well, 9/11 happened, the planes into the Twin Towers happened on Tuesday morning. That's when the Jessup paper was going to press. It happened, at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Deidre Hires from Jessup had worked late at her office in New York the night before, so she was sleeping late, and she had the window cracked to let in a little fresh air, and she woke up smelling smoke. She walked to her window to see what it was, and she saw the second plane fly in to the Twin Towers. We talked to her right after lunch, and we were on the street before any daily newspaper in the world. We had an eyewitness to 9/11. That's what we like to do, bring the international news home. People in Jessup are trained. They tease us all the time. How are there always Jessup people everywhere stuff when it happens? Well, our publisher's wife had students in London when they bombed a train in London. She had her students about 100 yards away and witnessed that. Got on the cell phone, called back. We had an eyewitness account. We brought that news home. Any of you see the movie Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu? Well, one of the Navy SEALs that went in to rescue the helicopter pilots is Darrell Wasden from Jessup, Georgia. They hired him later as a consultant to this movie. And he told me, he says, "I was really sort of a bashful boy growing up. I didn't know I was going to be a Navy SEAL." But he said, "You were the one that taught me to have some confidence in myself." I said, "Me? You?" He was the #1 sniper in the world. I said, "Me?" He said, "Yeah, as a 10-year-old, I sold subscriptions for your newspaper, and I was really embarrassed the first time I knocked on the door and said, 'Would you like to subscribe to the Press Sentinel?'" He said, "That's where I got up my confidence to deal with people." Well, You remember when Osama bin Laden got killed? As it turned out, Howard had just written on Monday or released his book on the memoirs of a Navy SEAL. Like on Tuesday, bin Laden was slaughtered, and the next thing, Howard was on Good Morning America, whatever, to Today's Ship. This jumped to the top of the New York Times bestsellers list, and we had us a bona fide way to talk about international news with a local Jessup people. One of my favorite things, though, is, and this might be a little bit young, far back for you, but in 2003 there was a big furor to catch Eric Rudolph. He was an abortion bomber, the abortion clinics, and he was gone for several years and they couldn't find him. Well, they found him in Andrews, North Carolina, where we have the Andrews Journal and the Cherokee Scout in Murphy. And I heard about it. It's on Friday. Now, our paper comes out on Thursday. So I called David Brown at 10 o'clock. As soon as I heard it, I said, Dave, we got to get an extra edition out. We got to get on this. He said, boss, we've been on this. He said, it's going to be out this afternoon. They put out an extra edition it was on the street by 5 o'clock that afternoon, Friday. Had a timeline. CNN was in our weekly newspaper in Murphy, North Carolina, asking us questions because we had all the information that they needed. You know what? We printed up enough of these. We advertised. You know how many of these we sold at $1 a piece? Talk about entrepreneurial. David Brown is an entrepreneur. 26,000 he sold of these. And so we don't wait for CNN to tell us what's going on in rural America. We want to be right on it. Well, Jim Thomason was publisher of the Noonan Times Herald. He said, take care of the local news and the advertising circulation will take care of itself. Well, that's mostly right, but you got to do a little more than that. You got to have compelling content, something that is an inseparable part of the community's soul. For me, I like to write every week because if I'm asking our people to write and meet a deadline, I do that too. And the rule is I won't go to bed on Sunday night unless it's written. I'm already written for this next week, so I get to go to bed early Sunday night if I want to. There's going to be a packet. I have a packet over there for all of you, and it's got some information in case you were napping and you wanted something to read. And I want to tell you about some people that you can't make this stuff up. I like to go find unusual people, and we're going to talk about a couple of them in just a minute. But what I want you to know is you're going to want to get one of these packets because in every one of them there's some cash. Every one of them. And it's just like in business. You got to keep digging. Some of them, if you dig hard enough, you're going to find 2 pieces of cash. There are going to be some small bills, and then at least one of them, there's a $100 bill. So the ladies are going to put this out over here, aren't you, Diane? Y'all going to put that out, and you get that. So don't toss it in the trash going out the door, because you're going to be throwing away some money. Well, not far from here is Elberton, Georgia. I found the son of the operator of the world's smallest airport. Now, y'all think you're pretty sporty with all your high-tech stuff, and I give you credit. But now, Grady Thrasher Jr. came home from World War II as a pilot, taught his brothers Bud and Tunis how to fly, and they opened up the Thrasher Brothers Flying Circus. They borrowed $1,000, bought this Ford, and then they took a plywood plank and mounted it to the top of that car, and then they had a J3 Cub, and they became the world's smallest airport right there in Elberton, Georgia. And they would run down the runway, the plane would take off from the top of that car, and then it'd come back and it'd land on the top of the car. And Grady, who's a lawyer, lives right around the corner from us here in Athens, was billed as the world's youngest pilot. He was 3 or 4 years old. His daddy would put him in this plane, and they would take the doors off of this plane. And he disconnected the stick on the co-pilot side, and then they'd take off, and Daddy Grady would climb out on the strut, hold on, and fly the plane with the other hand. And when they swoop down at the crowd at the circus, everybody see the little old Grady. He's up there flying the airplane at 3 years old. Well, Grady said that was real good until Mama found out about it, and then she shut down the world's smallest airport. And Grady said, growing up at Elberton, and we published the Elberton Star, by the way, Grady said his mother got a call from the police chief, said, Miss Thrasher, we've got a request. Well, what is that? Could you please leave the airport at home? Well, why? Because you're knocking down too many of our traffic signals and awnings off our buildings. Because Grady said that's how he went to school every morning in the world's smallest airport. Well, you can't make that stuff up. How about, have y'all ever seen Michael Davenport around town? How you seen him? Do you know how that happened? Well, I was curious. I went and visited with him. As a kid, he wanted to be Spider-Man. So he was forever throwing ropes over things and swinging from trees. One day he threw it over a high voltage line. It blew off his arms and it blew off his toes. And he said in the hospital he decided that this was for a reason. He said, I can be depressed or I can think the other way. He discovered he had a gift, and now he paints with his mouth. And he said, when I go see kids and they tell me, I can't, he said, don't tell me you can't. Look at me. If I can, you can. Well, how many of you would vote for this guy? This is Ellick Hopkins, the late Ellick Hopkins. Well, he was an interesting fella. He ran for county commissioner. There's a story in here about it. We want to get through here in just a minute. But he said, this is my motto when he ran for county commissioner. There's going to be a fist. They're going to tell the truth, or there's going to be a fist fight every first Tuesday. And brother, he would have fought him. He would have fought him because at the baseball diamond, when I was in high school, we built a new baseball diamond and we needed some light poles for it. And he went to our coach who played for Wally Butts back here in the 40s. He said, Alec, will you please donate some poles? You got the biggest timber in the county and I ain't gonna do it. Well, will you sell it to us for a discount? I ain't gonna do it. And he said, well, how will we get it? He said, I'll wrestle you for them. And that's kind of the way he talked. Well, they took off their shirt and they rolled up the blue jeans and they wrestled, and my coach beat him, and that's how we've got the light pole still standing in Jessup, Georgia today. You can't make that stuff up. I was in Winn-Dixie one day and he hey, he talked like that, and he pulled up this young woman. He said, hey, you know how you get a beautiful young woman like this to marry you? I said, no, Ellick, have $1 million, have $1 million. He was a pistol. Well, we got to click on down through here. You thought I was going to skip the digital age, didn't you? I mean, we're not completely old school. We've got young guns in our organization. And we know, see this poor kid here, he wants his picture taken, everybody's busy looking on the phone. And then, how about these people at the beach? Can you, what have they been doing? What have they been doing? And then these poor souls went to heaven, and if you can't read it, it says, most of the new arrivals seem incapable of conversation. They just stare at their hands in despair. What you reckon they're doing, huh? Well, we're embracing all the technology we know how. But if there is a solid business model out there, we don't know yet. We don't know yet, but we're really on to it. Alan and Eric, our sons, are in the business. Say, Dad, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, I'm not quite sure, but this business model gonna get me to the old folks' home. So y'all better figure it out, and they are. And we're embracing Facebook and Twitter and all the many different things. Well, I'm looking at my watch, and we want to leave a little time at the end. And I think about the guy that was trying to get Sanford Stadium right across there, and traffic was going everywhere. He was on the Baxter Street side and looked down toward 5 Points, and cars were coming every which way. Cars were coming up from the arch uptown, and he said, well, I'll never get across. But he said, I'm going to miss the kickoff. But luckily he was able to get out into the middle of the street, and when he did, he heard a car coming at him. So he zigged one way and then he zagged another way, and he just froze on the yellow line and said, Lord, I guess I'll miss the kickoff. I'll never get to see the Bulldogs again. Instead, the tires started squalling, and he could smell rubber that was boiling up. And so when he got brave enough, he sort of cocked open one eye, and the car was sitting right next to him, and the window was spooling down. And behind the steering wheel was a squirrel. And the squirrel said, "It ain't as easy as it looks, is it?" Well, it's not as easy as it looks. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to be able to take no, and you got to be resilient. And I'm looking at my watch, and I think about what Marilyn Monroe once said. She said, "I've been on a calendar, but I've never been on time." Keith, I think my time is just about up. I want to thank you for letting me come, and as you pursue your business goals, I want you to remember that it ain't as easy as it looks, and then I hope you'll get a copy of Buddy Jewell and adopt this as your theme song too. You want to thank everyone who's ever told you no.
Excuse me, yes, I understand.